Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this Tuesday. As always, I'm glad you're back. Yesterday we talked a lot about following the Vatican trail of money. I call them the richest organization in the world. And boy, it's easy to back that up when you look about all these concordats that they have with countries around the world. This is a very, very murky legal area that I want to get into today because it really exemplifies who they are. And when I say they're the most duplicitous organization in the world, I mean that. It's incredible when you start really looking at who they are. Now, I want to preface what I'm saying today regarding concordats, agreements, treaties with the Vatican and over 200 countries in the world. But I said yesterday, I came down pretty hard yesterday on truth movements, and I got an email saying, Greg, people are just trying to get to the truth, and why are you saying that it's not worth it for them to get involved in chemtrails, into 9/11, etc., etc.? And I said, well, listen, yesterday's show was geared at waking people up. I'm not going to tell a person not to get involved with his favorite truth movement or something that he feels dear in his heart to do, like maybe to help stray animals, things like that, or to work with the environment, to do many different things, working to stop chemtrails. But yesterday's show was geared at waking people up and saying, listen, if you do this, you got to go a step farther, because you have to say to yourself, look back in history and see exactly where these movements have taken us. Sure, a lot more people know there's chemtrails, but chemtrails is exploding all over the skies. It hasn't stopped. I was reading an article today about chemtrails, just a new one. It came out and said, a Army general admits there's chemtrails. Yeah, big deal. Are they going to stop them? Hell no. And do you really realize how bad they are? Sure we do. We know they're putting barium and all these toxic metals into the environment, which can have a devastating effect on the health of the earth as well as its people, as well as supercharging perhaps weaponized weather. So we know it exists, but is it ending? It's getting worse, and that was my point. And my point of yesterday's show was to let people know that you really have to get to the root cause before anything could ever change. And unfortunately, we don't. And this is a worldwide problem. I mean, this is something that is not just centered in America, although America being the Vatican-led New World Order's big prize, and they're working hard to bring us to its knees and create this kind of global environment that they want. Easier to control us, right? Your owners can control you quite easily if everybody is under the same laws, under the same basically you get the same information worldwide, right? Very easy to control instead of having, it's difficult to control even 50 states. Why do you think the states in the United States don't have the power they used to? Because they're centralizing all authority. So anyway, that's what yesterday's show was geared to do. Now today I want to take the normal approach that I take, and basically it's this. Sometimes when you do shows like this, you're reaching an audience that is at different spectrum of the truth scale, I call it. For example, I use a 1 to 10 scale. 1 meaning you're just beginning to break away from believing everything the government and the Vatican and all the religions tell you, all the way to 10 where you don't believe a word they say. And so I realize I talk to a lot of people in that truth scale at different levels, so to speak. And I understand that if I say something if I say this statement, the Vatican is a satanic organization, that will resonate with people on 8 or 9 or 10 on the true scale, but will not resonate with people 1, 2, 3 to 5. It'll maybe just go, boy, this guy's crazy, that's impossible. So I understand, whatever level you're at, I'm trying to make it easy for you. And so by doing stories like this, factual stories about finances, about how they operate in the world climate with different governments of the world, I think it is basically something that anybody from 1 to 10 on that truth scale can listen to. And the only thing I have to do is to emphasize that it's important to listen. It's kind of like going into a class and, the instructor saying, listen, okay, you're here for a reason. And today, folks, the reason you're here is to learn about concordats, human rights, separation of church and state, things like the tricks of how they get these agreements together without people knowing about them, even though they're supposed to, how to stop concordats, what the different countries, how many are there? 200. And how this religious threat is really a threat on human rights. And I think if you take it from that approach, and we'll forget about all of the emotional stuff, I think you'll understand when I make the statement that the Vatican-led New World Order has one goal, and that is total control under the Pope, using all of the minions in government as his secular pawns. So, with that, let's try to show you how they operate in the world. Now, the word concordat may be strange to you, but it's really just a legal agreement. Think of this. It's you getting together with somebody else. In this case, it's two countries. This is why the Vatican, for example, has state recognition, a country recognition in the United Nations, when it's as big as a football field. And this is weird. And the way they got it is very interesting. We'll get to that in another show, because it is totally amazing how they became a state, a country. Not only a country, but a religion as well. I mean, it's incredible. It's very unique. And if you ever are in Rome, you have to check out behind those Vatican walls. I used to walk through them all the time for years, having a job of covering certain things at the Vatican. And it's just amazing to me. I always wondered, how can this be a country? There's like 400 people. They have their own post office, their own everything. Police force, they have their own courts, everything. And it's right in the heart of Italy. How did that ever happen? Well, that would take a couple of shows to explain. But we're centering on how they operate under the radar, but yet gain total control of country. They're in 200 different countries or more. And it's really just a legal agreement between the country and the Vatican, which is not, don't think of it as a religion today. Think of it as a sovereign state, a country in itself. And how the Pope became this secular power, if you ever realize, is incredible. And we'll get to that at another time. But it can set up a theological fiefdom where certain human rights do not even apply, and where they can never again be introduced without the consent of the Catholic Church. So this is interesting, or we'll just say it's the Vatican State. Okay. Once you get involved with them, I'll show you how you can't get out. This is why concordats represent a fundamental threat to both any kind of democracy and human rights. Now, the Vatican State finds many different uses for its over 200 current legal agreements with countries. Now, for example, in May of 2012, listen to this. This is really interesting, and it has something to do with just think about the pedophile cases that just came to the news recently in America. And by the way, that's nothing new. I mean, here it's been treated like, wow, a one-time deal. Did they forget about what happened in Ireland? Have they forgotten on the news here that it goes on all over the world? Yeah, they don't tell you that. And the reaction from the news media shows you how they're in the pocket of the Vatican, because one of the broadcasters yesterday said this. He said, how are we going to handle this scandal? And he said, I think we should handle it by looking at our own faiths, if you're not a Catholic, And look at where we also went wrong. Don't just center the blame on the Catholic Church. I mean, what a bunch of garbage. And what they're trying to do is make it seem like it's just this kind of thing. It doesn't happen all the time. We got these bad apples in the basket. We'll get rid of them and we'll restore the good church. That's as far from the truth as you'll ever get. Now, in May 2012, so remember what the Vatican said yesterday. It said, we are sorry we made mistakes with these children. We're going to correct it. Now, that is just window dressing. That's not what they mean. They have to say that. Because listen what they said in 2012. In May of 2012, the Italian bishops even said that their Concordat, their agreement with the Italian state, excused them from having to report to the police suspected cases of child abuse by fellow priests. So here they are on one hand saying, we made a mistake by allowing this to happen, and we need to have the state help. And then the second, on the other side, they're saying, we don't have to tell you anything because of our agreement with you. Did you hear that? So don't believe a word they say. They are going to continue this action of, this kind of degradation of children from now to the end of time. It's not going to end. It'll only get worse. Trust me. Now, if you look at some of these concordats, they're usually translated into two languages, the language of the country and then the Italian language, which is the official language of the Vatican. Okay? Now, this is a little murky, but you got to realize that this is important here, because this is how they get away with literally murder. These concordats, now, they're international treaties, right? That's what most of them are. With the Vatican, that may range from granting little more than diplomatic recognition, which is at the low scale, to a legally binding commitment to observe key aspects of Vatican doctrine, canon law, and to have taxpayers from countries subsidize the church. Now, because the state may be put under pressure to enforce these policies, you got to read stuff regarding church and state separation, and we'll get to that, because in our country, okay, what's the situation here in America? Let's just use America as an example. We have diplomatic relations set up with the Vatican. We don't have a legal treaty, but we don't need one here because they use our Constitution to get everything they want. So we've been doing this since, prior to Reagan, we cut off diplomatic relations with them because of the Lincoln assassination. Ever since the Patriots back then said, hey, no more, you kill our president, you're not welcome here. Although the priests were welcome. So nothing really changed, it just went under the table a bit. But then, as time passed, and as the politicians said, well, nobody even remembers that. And if you look at anything on the Lincoln assassination in history, in the normal history books, you're never going to get the true story. So they said, well, now it's time to let people know we're bringing the Vatican back, and they're going to have their little office building in Washington, and we got our diplomatic relations. But when you realize the subsidies that we're giving them, it's an amazing story. And plus, when next to our government, they're the largest holder of assets, corporation, and land in our country. So, and I guess you got to put the Chinese in there too. But so you're going to look at this material on church and state that we'll get to, because it's important, because there is supposed to be a separation between the church and the state, right? Well, no more. It doesn't exist when you're talking about these Vatican and their concordats. So, in one place, concordats are removed from democratic control forever. Now, let me explain this to you, because yesterday I kind of glossed over it and said, they do these treaties, people don't even know about them, and supposedly with a treaty, you're supposed to have some kind of legislative recognition and approval. But here's how it operates really. So really, when you say they get into these treaties and nobody knows about it, it's true. But let me tell you how they do it. The laws can be changed by parliaments, by United States Congress, by democratic institutions in other countries like Mexico, etc. But concordats cannot be changed. Okay, let me explain why. That's because they're supposed to be international treaties. Now they have over 200 of these. That is, agreements between a real country and the Holy See and the Vatican country. Okay? So that's the agreement. Two countries getting together. Now, even in democracies, okay, most democracies, there is only a brief period. This is like even in our country, or the more advanced democracies in the world that are in bed with the Vatican. There's supposed to be, time to reflect on this and to have a vote. People are supposed to know, but in effect, what really happens is these votes take place, if they ever do, in a matter of days. This can only, and it does not allow for proper legal scrutiny of any one of these documents. Now, I've went to a couple sites and researchers who are meticulous about following every one of these Vatican concordats. And they say the general rule is that these countries are sneaking these agreements through. Now, you get a few days, you got legislative tricks may be used to get the concordat through. And there's a whole bunch of tricks they use to get an agreement with a country so they can get special favors. Now, once these concordats, so we can talk about, there's a handful, 10 to 15 documented sneaky little lawyer tricks they use to bypass the vote of people or scrutiny to get these concordats in it. And most people in any country, I bet you go to Australia, England, Germany, you go to America and you say, do you realize that the Vatican has a treaty with you? No, they'll go, no. They're a religious organization. What do you mean a treaty? Well, yeah, remember yesterday we talked about how much money these countries are actually spending on the Vatican and how they're not even taking care of their poor children? How about the country that built the biggest cathedral in the world? It's the poorest country in the world. They build the biggest cathedral in the world, and these people are starving. But yet they can come in the Vatican, and the Vatican can say, we forgive you, and you will go to heaven. So don't worry about starving here on earth. Okay? Now, the reason, once you get in bed with these people this way, a concordat or a treaty, it's set in stone. It's not going to be, you can't come up the next month and go, I want to change that with a new vote, or you get new parliament people in, new legislative people. No, because a concordat it's ratified in stone. That's because treaties cannot be changed unilaterally. Any alteration requires the consent of both parties. That means if I'm a country like Brazil, and I say, hey, I don't like paying you guys this anymore, the Vatican says, oh, that's too bad, we got to agree to it. It can't be changed unilaterally. So it's set in stone. And in a dictatorship, and a lot of countries aren't even democratic like ours, right? It's worse. It can be rubber stamped by a military junta, by some dictator, or even go through with no ratification at all. For the signature of the dictator and his foreign minister is enough, and the people, they don't know. Yet when the dictator is toppled, let's say the dictator is toppled, the concordat remains. Now, what they do ensure for the Vatican, and this is why I call them the richest organization in the world, with little or no oversight on how they do business, sometimes the concordats ensure a never-ending transfer of state funds to the church. Now, you might be sitting here going, Greg, this show's geared towards just learning about how they do this. I'm not even getting into whether it's illegal or even into their illegal drug trade, into their pedophilia, into trafficking of human beings, slave trade, all of the illegal things they've been involved with over the years. This is just how they get into a country to perhaps shift funds to do things. to get benefits. Sometimes the money transfer is justified. Now, it can be a never-ending transfer. And sometimes in countries it's justified as compensation for church property, nationalized as long as, 200 years ago. Concordats can lock in inflation-adjusted payments that cannot be ended unless the Vatican agrees. Concordats often shift funds to the church by requiring that the Catholic Church, Catholic schools, hospitals, and other agencies must be paid by the state. This gives the church the say over what is taught and what services are offered, without having to pay the tab. Pretty good, isn't it? A concordat can also help church agencies get tax exemptions, even for church-run commercial enterprises. And despite all the state money flowing in, the concordat can ensure that the finances of the church are, guess what? Kept secret. Nobody knows about them. And that's in the agreement. So they're getting, they're getting their cake and eat it too. They get everything free when somebody wants to say, hey, where's this money going? Your politicians won't tell you. They can sometimes, these concordats, can also infringe on human rights. They give advantages to one religious group over others. Concordats can violate the requirement that all citizens and religions be treated equally. I thought that's what America's all about. But nowhere in the world are you going to find that. Occasionally, concordats have outlawed divorce, even for non-Catholics. Concordats can also anchor other parts of the canon or church law by stipulating that this is to be used within church institutions. So they're overriding a country's law and putting in their own. Well, what's the difference then? Everybody here in America is worried about, we can't allow Sharia law. Well, not everybody. Half the country says, hey, who cares? Let them have Sharia law. Yeah, you want to have Sharia law? Yeah, you won't have any rights. But what's the difference, really, if the Vatican can come here and force their canon law on people through an agreement? Then what's the difference in that from Sharia law? It's the same thing, except it's a different faith, right? And they can stipulate it to be used within church institutions or outside of the institutions. But these also include social agencies. Many non-clerics and even non-Catholics may find themselves legally obliged to obey church canon law. And I say, what's the difference between that and what the Muslims want to do with Sharia law? The difference is the Vatican has a great PR campaign. They have a great public relations department. They can BS you with the best of them. And everybody thinks, they can't do anything wrong because the Pope tells us he's God on earth. He's Christ on earth. He's also King of the earth. They don't really tell you that, but that's what you ever hear of Pontifex? He's called Pontifex Maximus. Get the translation on that. So he's not only wants to be the God on earth, he wants to be the King of the earth, and that's exactly what he's trying to do. Using these concordats, as well as many, many other things, we've gotten into the duplicitous things. We've gotten into the deceptive things. We've gotten into how the Jesuits are the assassins for the Pope, and how organizations around the world like the FBI, the CIA, Mossad, the rest of them actually should be called the Pope's secret services, because that's who they really work for. The IRS, we call them the Pope's collection agency. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.